The night was too quiet. Not peaceful. Quiet in that way that makes your skin crawl. Like the city itself was holding its breath. I left the hospital just after midnight, my scrubs wrinkled, my body aching. Rain clung to the air, but never fell. The streetlights flickered overhead, casting pale halos over the empty sidewalk. I should have called a car. I should have walked faster. I should have listened to my gut. But when you grow up with nothing, your instincts get overwritten by necessity. You cut corners. You save the cab fare. You take the long way home. I didn't hear the van until it was too late. Tires screeched against wet asphalt. Doors flung open. Hands, rough, gloved, grabbed my arms and dragged me back before I could scream. My cry caught in my throat as a sack was thrown over my head. Darkness swallowing everything. Panic hit first, then training. I counted breaths, listened. One voice barked orders. Another cursed in Italian. The van bounced, turned sharply, then stopped. The door opened. Out! Someone hissed. They didn't hurt me, just shoved me forward into a cold, wet space that smelled of rust and blood. The sack came off. I blinked. Dim lighting, concrete walls, the scent of iron and sweat, and him. A man lay on a table in the center of the room, shirtless, bleeding, barely conscious. I couldn't see his face clearly. Shadows cloaked him, and his skin was slick with blood. But his chest rose and fell in ragged breaths. A gunshot wound. Upper abdomen. No exit. Fix him, said one of the men behind me. I hesitated. I need gloves, gauze, thread. Something to sterilize. The supplies were shoved into my arms before I could finish. I moved without thinking, instincts taking over. I cleaned the wound, stabilized the bleeding. My fingers moved fast, precise. His pulse was weak but steady. His body was strong, every muscle tense, even half unconscious. His blood was hot under my hands. Stay with me, I whispered before threading the needle. Come on, don't die. A low sound escaped his throat, like a growl. When I looked at his face again, our eyes met, only for a second. Dark, bottomless, unreadable, and then stillness. They pulled me back before I could say anything. Someone shoved a cloth into my hands. Another tied the sack over my head again. The next thing I knew, I was dumped on the sidewalk a block from the hospital. Alone, like none of it had ever happened. At home, I peeled off my damp scrubs with shaking hands. I should have called the police, but what would I say? That armed men kidnapped me to save one of their own? That I touched the body of a criminal and felt something I couldn't name. My fingers still tingled where I'd touched his skin. I stood under the shower until the water ran cold, hoping to wash it away. It clung to me. That night, I dreamed, or thought I dreamed. I was back in that cold room. The man on the table was no longer bleeding. He stood above me, shadowed, silent. He reached for me. His hand touched my cheek. Warm, rough, reverent. I didn't flinch. Couldn't. My body pulsed in response. He leaned in, lips brushing mine without touching, his breath hot against my mouth. You saved me, he murmured. My breath hitched. The air thickened, wrapped around me. His hand slid down my sides, slow, possessive. I gasped, the sound high, shocked, and still. I didn't move away. I wanted to scream. I wanted to beg for more. Then I woke up, alone, heart racing, sheets damp. The window was open. I stared at it for a long time. I had locked it. I knew I had. Something shifted inside me. A tremor I couldn't name. Fear, yes, but something else too. Something I'd never admit out loud. A heat that curled low in my belly. And for the first time, I wasn't sure what scared me more. That someone had touched me while I slept. Or that I had liked it.
Pain is familiar. It reminds you you're alive, and who tried to end you. But this was different. Not just pain. Warmth, fingers, a touch that didn't belong in my world. She smelled like rain and antiseptic. Her voice, quiet, controlled, cut through the haze. I didn't catch her words. I caught something else. Her breath when she leaned close. The hesitation in her hands, fighting instinct with fear. She wasn't one of mine. She didn't belong in the blood-soaked shadows I called home. And yet, she was touching me, healing me. The bullet wound screamed. My body screamed louder. But she moved like none of it mattered. Don't die, she whispered. Like it was a command, and I didn't. I let the fever take me, let the pain blur the edges, but I memorized her voice, her pulse, the way her hands trembled for exactly 3 seconds, and then steadied, like she decided to survive this moment, no matter what. That's what did it. Not the face, not the softness, the fire. They dumped her near the hospital after she finished. No names, no thanks. Just a van door opening in the dark, and her body pushed into the night like she never mattered. but she mattered, and I needed to see her again. I stood across the street from the hospital the next night, half hidden behind a line of parked cars. My stitches burned with every breath. I didn't care. She appeared just after midnight. No security, no ride, a canvas bag slung over her shoulder. She looked tired, too thin, the kind of tired you don't fix with sleep. But even in that exhaustion, she moved with purpose. No wasted steps, no self-pity. She turned a corner. I followed silently. I could hear the click of her shoes against wet pavement, could tell from the tilt of her head that she felt it, the presence behind her, the eyes. She stopped, glanced over her shoulder. I vanished into the alley before she could see me. Still, her breath caught. I heard it. She knew something hunted her. She didn't know what. Not yet. Later I found her building, waited for the lights to go out. Waited longer. At 3:13 a.m., I picked the lock. No alarm system, not even a second deadbolt. Too trusting, too easy. She slept facing the window, one hand curled near her mouth, lips slightly parted. A dreamer. Her bedroom was clean, but small. A bookshelf, a faded photo of two girls. One of them younger, thinner. Her, probably. There was a vulnerability in the way she slept that made my jaw tighten. She had no idea how dangerous the world was. How dangerous I was. I sat on the edge of her bed, slow, careful. She didn't stir. Not until I touched her. Just her shoulder at first. A whisper of contact. Her skin was warm. She inhaled sharply. Not awake. Not quite. She shifted under the sheets. Breath catching. A sound escaped her lips. A whimper. Not fear. Not pain. Need. I stilled. My fingers trailed down her arm, then lower. The hem of her shirt lifted slightly. My knuckles brushed her bare stomach. She arched. Just a little. Just enough. I didn't breathe. Her heartbeat pulsed under her skin like a trapped animal. And mine nearly broke my ribs. I leaned in, close enough to feel the heat of her breath. My lips ghosted her temple, then her cheek, but I didn't kiss her. Not yet. Not until she begged. She whimpered again, twisting in the sheets. Her thighs pressed together. My name would have sounded perfect on her tongue, but she didn't know it. Not yet, and I didn't want her to learn it from anyone else. I stood, watched her breathe, memorized the shape of her, the soft swell of her lower lip. She'd wake up confused, maybe afraid, but a seed had been planted, and I would feed it with every breath she took, because now she was marked. She wasn't just the woman who saved my life. She was mine. She just didn't know it yet.
It wasn't a dream. I told myself it was. I repeated it like a prayer, but I felt it. My skin still burned in places no one had touched. My body pulsed with a low, dangerous throb that hadn't stopped since that night. And worse, I missed it. The weight on the bed, the warm breath near my face, the hand on my thigh. I should have been terrified, but fear had twisted into something unrecognizable, something that made me ache. I barely slept now. Every night I locked the windows, double-checked the door, but the air still shifted in the dark, the shadows still moved, and I started waiting for it, wanting it, even as I trembled under the sheets, even as I hated myself for it. The hospital was the only place I could pretend to be normal. There, I had tasks, deadlines, patients to keep alive, but even there he haunted me. I started noticing things, a tray of instruments left half-wiped, a locker door I could have sworn I closed, swinging open again. And once, a black rose on the counter in the break room. No note, just one, deep crimson at the edges, almost rotting. No one else seemed to see it. Or if they did, they didn't ask. I threw it away, then dug it out of the trash an hour later and hid it in my locker. It was during rounds that Adrian caught me zoning out. "You've checked that vitals chart 3 times, he said, voice soft. I think it got the message. I forced a laugh, folding the clipboard against my chest. Sorry, long week. Adrian was warm, reliable. His presence didn't rattle me, and maybe that was the problem. He studied me for a beat, then smiled, crooked and boyish. You're not sleeping, are you? I looked away. I'm fine. He stepped closer. You know, some people talk to coworkers about things like that. Friends. Or, he paused, brushing his knuckles lightly against my arm. Maybe even more than friends. The contact was harmless, sweet even, but my stomach clenched. Not with nerves, with guilt. Because the second his fingers touched my skin, I remembered another hand. Bigger, rougher, hungrier. I'm just tired, I said too quickly. Adrian didn't push, just nodded. Dinner sometime. You pick the day. I smiled, said nothing, and felt the heat of invisible eyes burning into my back as he walked away. That night, I didn't lock the window. I told myself I forgot, but that was a lie. I lay awake for hours, the sheets tangled around my legs, heart fluttering without cause. Then, movement. The air thickened. My breath stopped. The bed dipped, slow, deliberate. A hand slid over my ribs beneath the thin fabric of my shirt, fingertips grazing the underside of my breast. I gasped, freezing, torn between pulling away and arching closer. My body chose for me. My back arched, my thighs parted. Shame rushed in like a flood. This was wrong. I didn't even know his name. I hadn't seen his face, but I knew his scent, leather and smoke and something darker, something male. I knew his heat. His breath ghosted over my collarbone. My nipples tightened beneath the fabric. I turned my head to the side, eyes clenched shut, mouth trembling open. A sound slipped from me, a whimper I couldn't swallow. His lips never touched mine, but I felt them, felt the not touch more than any kiss. And then, gone. The bed unweighted, the air cold again. I opened my eyes. No one. But my body was still pulsing. My sheets were soaked, my breath shallow. I curled into myself, pressing a fist to my mouth to stifle the sob that rose, because it wasn't fear that filled me. It was craving, and I didn't know if I hated him more for doing this to me, or myself, for wanting him back.
She wants it. She just doesn't understand that, but her body does. And last night, it answered me like a prayer. I was already inside before she stirred. The locks meant nothing. Her window invited me in, curtains swaying like a whisper. I could have announced myself, spoken her name, but that would have broken the spell. She lay in bed like an offering, one arm above her head, the sheet barely covering her thighs. Her skin glowed in the moonlight, flushed, fevered. She felt me, even before I touched her. The moment the bed dipped, her breathing shifted, light, uneven, anticipated. I ran a single finger up her side, slow and deliberate. When I reached the curve of her breast, her back arched with a low gasp. Not fear, not panic, need. I watched her fight it, watched the flutter of her lashes, the tremble of her lips. She was half asleep, half awake, caught in that space between dreams and sin. She moaned. God, it was soft, but it wrecked me. I should have stopped. I told myself to stop. But her shirt clung to her like a second skin. One hand slid beneath the hem, feeling the softness of her stomach, the twitch of her muscles under my palm. When her thighs shifted, I knew I was losing control. Not yet. Not yet. I pulled back, retreating just enough to breathe. Her scent clung to my hands, warm skin and something sweeter, darker. My heart pounded so hard I could feel it in my fingertips. She was close, so close, and still completely unaware of who I was. That made it worse. Made it better. She desired a ghost, a shadow, but I wasn't satisfied with being just that. I watched her at the hospital the next morning. She was distracted, nervous. Her hands moved efficiently, but her eyes flicked to corners, windows, shadows. She could feel me, even in daylight. Good. The boy, Adrian, found her near the staff lounge. I could see the tension in her shoulders before he even spoke. He touched her arm, leaned in close. Her smile didn't reach her eyes, but he thought it did. That was enough to twist a knife into my side. He doesn't know what she sounds like when she moans in her sleep. He doesn't know the way her breath catches when she's about to lose control. He doesn't know her. I do. I gripped the steering wheel hard enough to make the leather. If he tries to kiss her, I'll end him. That night, I waited, not in the shadows, not with hesitation. I stood beside her bed, fully visible in the moonlight streaming through the open window. She stirred, sensing me. She was awake now, not fully, but enough. Her lids fluttered, her breath caught, her hand twitched against the sheets. Who? She murmured, barely audible. I didn't answer. Instead, I leaned down, slowly, letting my presence sink into her bones. My lips hovered above hers. This time, I would take it, not a whisper, not a ghost. A kiss. Real, possessive. And when she opened those eyes, those wide, haunted, beautiful eyes, I would be the last thing she ever...
It started like all the other nights, a heaviness in the air. The slow, familiar shift of the mattress, my breath catching before I even opened my eyes. But this time, I didn't stay frozen. My eyes fluttered open, and he was there. Not a shadow, not a dream, a man, standing at the foot of my bed, cloaked in black, eyes like obsidian catching the light, watching me. My lungs refused to move. My mind screamed, but my body remembered him, the way he'd touched me, the way I'd responded. He didn't speak. He just stared, as if trying to decide whether to destroy me or devour me. Then he moved, slow, smooth, like smoke with weight. He sat on the edge of the bed, and I still hadn't screamed. Why hadn't I screamed? He reached for me. My heart slammed against my ribs so hard I thought it might crack. His hand brushed my jaw. Not rough, not cruel, but there was no question. This was possession. His thumb dragged across my lower lip. I shivered. He leaned in. I should have pulled away. I didn't. His mouth touched mine, and the world stopped. It wasn't gentle. It wasn't patient. It was claiming. My fingers clenched the sheets. My body arched toward him. Every part of me lit up like fire had been poured beneath my skin. When he pulled back, I was gasping. He stood. And just like that, he was gone. The window swung silently shut behind him. I didn't sleep again. I sat curled in the corner of my bed, blanket pulled tight around me, fingers trembling. What was that? Who was he? And why? Why had I kissed him back? At the hospital, everything felt wrong. The lights were too bright, the hallways too cold. I jumped at every sound. Every touch made me flinch. I was breaking. Then Adrian appeared, coffee in hand. "You look like hell," he said, half joking, half concerned. "Nightmares again?" I nodded, not trusting my voice. He offered the coffee. "I know I keep pushing, but let me take you out. Just one night. Good food, soft music, no blood or fluorescent lights." It sounded perfect. It sounded safe. It sounded like a lie. I smiled. Maybe. He smiled back, hopeful. But in the space between us, I felt those black eyes watching, felt the phantom heat of lips that had already stolen mine, and I knew. There was no maybe anymore. The man who kissed me in the dark wasn't going to let me go, and God help me, I wasn't sure I wanted him to. He touched her. I saw it from across the street, the way his hand brushed her back, the way her shoulders tightened, not in fear, not entirely, but with something that made my vision blur. She smiled at him, not the smile she gave me in the dark, not the soft, breathless surrender I pulled from her lips in the half-light of her bedroom. This was polite, tense, but a smile, and it belonged to someone else. I tasted blood. I'd bitten the inside of my cheek. Adrian D'Alessio, privileged, predictable, heir to a clean world, polished floors and spotless records. A world where people like me are nothing more than whispered warnings and security briefings. But Elena, she wasn't meant for that world either. She belonged to the shadows now, to me. I watched as he handed her a coffee, smiled that stupid, easy smile, said something that made her laugh, soft, uncertain, the kind of laugh people give when they don't know how to say no. Her hand brushed his, just for a second. I stepped back into the alley and punched the wall. The sound of cracking stone echoed like thunder. My knuckles split open. I didn't feel it. Luca's voice came through the earpiece. "Target's leaving the hospital. You want us to follow him?" "No," I growled. "I want his world to crack." I didn't need Adrian dead. Not yet. I needed him afraid. I needed Elena confused, and I needed both of them to know. Whatever passed between them, it wasn't safe. That night, I returned to her room. She was already in bed, but this time, I didn't go to her. I stood in the corner, watched her sleep, waited. She turned in her sleep, restless, whispered something. I couldn't make it out. Her lips moved again. A name? If it was his, I swear. I stepped forward. My boot hit the floor louder than I meant. She stirred. Eyes fluttered. Not fully awake, but close. Good. Let her feel me there. Let her know the dark doesn't let go so easily. I reached out, touched her ankle beneath the covers. Her breath caught. I slid my hand up, over her calf, her thigh, my palm against the heat between her legs, even through fabric. She arched toward me, moaned. She thought it was a dream. She always thought it was a dream. But what I was about to give her, she would remember. I leaned in close, my voice a whisper against her lips. "If you ever smile for him again, I'll break his hand." She whimpered, and when I pressed my mouth to hers, hard, claiming, she kissed me back, asleep, awake. It didn't matter. Her body knew who it belonged to. I woke up with the words still in my ears. "If you ever smile for him again, I'll break his hands." The voice was low, rough, close enough to taste. It wasn't a dream. I knew that now, because my body wasn't lying to me. My mouth still tingled from the kiss. Brutal, possessive. My thighs were slick with shame. My pulse raced with leftover panic, and something far worse. I had wanted it, even as he threatened another man, even as his hand slid between my legs like he owned me. I had moaned. I had kissed him back. My skin burned with the memory of his touch. I sat up, clutching the sheets to my chest, trying to breathe through the tremor that hadn't left me since his voice slid into the cracks of my mind. What was happening to me? Was I losing my grip on reality, or was I finally seeing it for what it was? The light through the window did nothing to warm me. My body was hot, but my bones felt cold. I took the longest shower of my life, scrubbing every inch of myself until my skin turned red. I pressed my forehead to the tile and whispered, "It's not real. He's not real." But my thighs clenched at the lie. He was real, and he'd been in my bed, Again. Only now. I was awake. At the hospital, everything felt too loud, too bright. My own hand shook as I took vitals, and I snapped at a nurse for bumping into me. Anna, always too observant, cornered me near the locker room. "You're pale," she said, and twitchy. "Didn't sleep," I mumbled. "You never sleep. But this?" Her eyes narrowed. "You look haunted." I looked away. "I'm fine." Lie. A haunting implies something dead. This man wasn't a ghost. He was alive. He was watching. He was touching. And he was warning me. Adrian found me during my lunch break, offering a smile and a coffee, just like yesterday. "I figured you wouldn't eat unless someone handed you calories," he joked, sitting across from me. I managed a smile, but it died on my lips, because I could feel it. The heat, the burn, eyes, somewhere. Not watching, hunting. Adrian noticed. "You okay?" "No. I think I'm just tired," I whispered. "You need to let me take you out of this place." He leaned forward, his hand brushing mine across the table. "You don't have to live like this, Elena. You deserve—" I pulled my hand back, heart hammering, and for one horrible moment, I imagined Damiano's fist slamming into Adrian's hand, bones cracking, fingers breaking, just because he touched me. The arousal that followed made me want to throw up. I stood. "I have to go." "Elena, wait!" But I was already walking away, fast, my legs trembling, because I finally understood something. This thing inside me, this craving for danger, this lust tangled with fear. It wasn't just him. It was mine. He hadn't brought it. He'd awakened it.
She's ready. I feel it in the way her body moves. Not just when I touch her, but when I'm not there. She walks differently, looks over her shoulder, keeps her lips parted like she's waiting for a breath that doesn't come. She senses me, craves me, even in daylight, but she still doesn't know who I am. Not really. That ends tonight. I watched her through the glass at the hospital cafe. Adrian sat across from her, smiling. Too familiar, too close. He reached for her hand again. She didn't pull away fast enough, and I saw red. Jealousy, in my world, is not a feeling. It's a trigger. I stepped back, jaw clenched, fists burning. I didn't want to punish her, but I needed her to understand. She had already chosen. Her body had chosen. Her silence in the dark had been consent. Her moans had been prayer. I was only answering them. That night, I didn't go to her window. I waited by the alley behind her building, near the street lamp that kept flickering in and out like it couldn't decide which world it belonged to. Light or shadow, just like her. I knew her, the rhythm of her steps, and when I heard them, soft, quick, nervous, I stepped forward. She froze before I said a word. Good. She knew. Not who I was, but what I was. A presence, a consequence, a storm wearing a man's shape. Her breath caught as I emerged from the dark, my face no longer hidden, no mask, no veil, just me. Our eyes locked, and for the first time, she didn't run. She stared, and I let her take in the man she'd kissed in the dark, the man who kissed her back like he'd been starving for. I stepped closer, her lips parted. She whispered, "You're real." I didn't answer. I cupped her face, gentle, reverent, and lowered my mouth to her. This time, she was awake. This time, there was no dream to She kissed me back, mouth open, heart racing, hands trembling, and when I pulled away, just enough to speak, I said the first truth I've ever wanted someone to hear. "You don't belong to him." My fingers traced her throat, resting over her pulse. "You belong to me." She's ready. I feel it in the way her body moves. Not just when I touch her, but when I'm not there. She walks differently, looks over her shoulder, keeps her lips parted like she's waiting for a breath that doesn't come. She senses me, craves me, even in daylight, but she still doesn't know who I am. Not really. That ends tonight. I watched her through the glass at the hospital cafe. Adrian sat across from her, smiling. Too familiar, too close. He reached for her hand again. She didn't pull away fast enough, and I saw red. Jealousy, in my world, is not a feeling. It's a trigger. I stepped back, jaw clenched, fists burning. I didn't want to punish her, but I needed her to understand. She had already chosen. Her body had chosen. Her silence in the dark had been consent. Her moans had been prayer. I was only answering them. That night, I didn't go to her window. I waited by the alley behind her building, near the street lamp that kept flickering in and out like it couldn't decide which world it belonged to. Light or shadow, just like her. I knew her, the rhythm of her steps, and when I heard them, soft, quick, nervous, I stepped forward. She froze before I said a word. Good. She knew. Not who I was, but what I was. A presence, a consequence, a storm wearing a man's shape. Her breath caught as I emerged from the dark, my face no longer hidden, no mask, no veil, just me. Our eyes locked, and for the first time, she didn't run. She stared, and I let her take in the man she'd kissed in the dark, the man who kissed her back like he'd been starving for. I stepped closer, Her lips parted. She whispered, "You're real." I didn't answer. I cupped her face, gentle, reverent, and lowered my mouth to her. This time, she was awake. This time, there was no dream to She kissed me back, mouth open, heart racing, hands trembling, and when I pulled away, just enough to speak, I said the first truth I've ever wanted someone to hear. "You don't belong to him." My fingers traced her throat, resting over her pulse. "You belong to me."
I tasted him all the way home. The kiss hadn't been sweet. It hadn't been gentle. It hadn't asked for permission, but it was real. And that was what shattered me, because I kissed him back, fully awake, fully aware. My lips were still swollen, my breath still erratic. I slammed the door of my apartment behind me and paced the floor like a trapped animal, dragging my fingers through my hair, trying to shake off the feel of his hands on my skin. I couldn't. He hadn't taken anything, but he'd left something behind. His scent, his heat, him. Every time I blinked, I saw those eyes, that mouth, that voice. "You don't belong to him, Elena. You belong to me." God, why hadn't I screamed? Why had I melted instead? The next morning, I stared at myself in the mirror for 10 full minutes. My lips looked bruised. My skin looked flushed. I'd barely slept. I didn't eat. My hands still trembled. But the worst part wasn't what he did. It was how I'd felt, free. In those seconds, everything else disappeared. The hospital, the rules, the fear, the weight of expectations. He kissed me like I was fire and he needed to burn, and I had let him. At work, Adrian found me near the elevators. His smile was careful now, measured, like he sensed something had shifted. "You didn't answer my text," he said, trying to sound light. I forced a smile. "I've been overwhelmed. You look it." He paused, studying me. "Can I help?" "Yes," I wanted to say. "Make me normal again. Make this darkness go away." But when he reached out, just a hand on my shoulder, my body recoiled. Not because he frightened me, but because he didn't. He didn't make my heart race. He didn't make my skin burn. He didn't make me feel. "I'm okay," I lied. That night, I kept the windows locked, the curtains drawn, but it didn't matter. He wasn't just in the shadows anymore. He was in my veins, in my breath, in the ache between my legs. I touched myself that night, and I hated myself for it, because I imagined his hands, his mouth, his voice in my ear, telling me I was his. And when I came, biting down on my own arm to keep from crying out, I whispered his name. I didn't even know it, but I whispered it all the same.
She came willingly, not with words, not with trust, not yet, but with silence. And silence is consent in my world. She didn't scream when I appeared in her hallway, didn't run when I said, "Come with me." She looked at me, eyes full of fear, full of questions, and nodded once. That was all I needed. I drove her through streets she didn't recognize, alleys that twisted like veins through the city's underbelly. She kept glancing at me in the dark, searching for the man behind the shadow. But I gave her nothing, not yet. She'd see me soon enough, all of me. The apartment was silent when we arrived, not the kind of silence that waits, the kind that watches. Lights low, furniture minimal, everything black and steel, but clean, immaculate, like me. She stood just inside the door, arms crossed tight over her chest. "You live here?" I nodded. "Sometimes." She didn't move further in. I didn't push her. Instead, I poured a glass of water, set it on the table. "You're safe here." She laughed, short, bitter. "Am I?" I stepped closer slowly, watching the way her breath hitched. "You've always been safe with me, Elaine, even when you didn't know it." "That's not safety," she whispered. "That's obsession." I smiled. "Sometimes they're the same." She wandered the space like it might bite her, ran her fingers along the marble countertop, stared at the paintings on the wall, all dark, all faceless. Finally she turned to me. "What do you want from me?" I stepped closer, but not enough to touch her. "Everything." She trembled, not from fear, from truth. "You can't just take." "I haven't." I tilted my head. "But you gave." Her mouth opened, closed, because she knew. The dreams, the moans, the way her body moved under my hands even while she slept. I hadn't taken. I'd answered. She sat on the edge of the wide, low bed that dominated the space. Her fingers dug into the sheets. I stayed standing, leaning against the door. "I should hate," she whispered. "I'd let you," I said. "You don't." Her eyes met mine, fire and confusion. "Why me?" I crossed the room in 3 steps, stood before her, not touching. "You stitched me back together. You touched me without flinching. You gave me your fear and your warmth in the same breath. You made me feel." I exhaled, slow, human. She shook her head. "You're not." "No." I knelt before her, eye level. "But you make me wish I was." I reached up, brushed her hair behind her ear. She didn't move, didn't blink. I leaned in, so close I could taste her breath, but I didn't kiss her. Not yet. Instead, I whispered, "Stay," and walked away.
I didn't sleep. Not because I was afraid he would come to me, but because I was afraid he wouldn't. The room he gave me was too quiet, too beautiful. Soft, charcoal sheets, black silk robe on the edge of the bed, a dim lamp casting gold over marble floors. It smelled like him. Everything did. Leather, smoke, rain. I stood in the doorway long after he disappeared, not knowing if I was allowed to follow, not knowing why I wanted to. I should have left, should have run while he wasn't looking, but I stayed, because part of me had already stopped running. I curled under the sheets, fully clothed, the silk too soft against my skin. My heart beat hard, echoing in my ribs. Every creak in the floor made me sit up. Every shadow made me ache. But he never came, and that hurt worse. I woke to light seeping through long blackout curtains, filtered and gray. There was a tray by the bed, coffee, bread, honey, fresh fruit. I stared at it like it was a threat, because it meant something terrifying. He cared. In the mirror, I barely recognized myself. Pale, lips raw from being chewed all night, eyes dark from no sleep, and from something else, want. The kind I'd never felt before. The kind that burrowed under your skin and whispered things you couldn't say out loud. Things like, I want him to come back. Things like, I want him to touch me again. I explored the apartment like a thief. Everything was pristine, cold, expensive, no personal photos, no clutter. But there were books, hundreds of them. Crime, war, medicine, philosophy, and one of them, had a rose petal pressed between its pages. Dark, fading, familiar. I closed it fast, as if it had whispered my name. By mid-afternoon, I felt feverish with indecision, so I did what anyone would do. I checked my phone. He hadn't taken it. He hadn't even looked at it. 3 messages from Adrian. Are you okay? Elena, please talk to me. If something's wrong, tell me where you are. I held the phone like it might explode in my hands, because he meant safety. He meant sense. He meant before the shadows, before the kisses in the dark, before I whispered yes without saying a word. I typed, I'm fine, then deleted it, and turned the phone off. That night I opened the door to the hallway and stepped barefoot into the dark. The apartment was silent, but I felt him, not behind me, around me, the presence that made the air warmer, the blood thicker. I wandered until I found the wide double doors I hadn't dared to open before. His room. It was bigger, colder, dominated by a bed that looked like it belonged in a palace. He sat near the window, back to me, shirtless. The sight stole the breath from my lungs, scars across his shoulder, muscles carved like marble. I should have turned around. Instead, I stepped inside. He didn't move. I crossed the room slowly, the floor cold under my feet, stopped just behind him. I didn't leave, I whispered. Finally, he turned. His eyes found mine in the dim light, and for the first time, I didn't flinch.
She stood there, barefoot, in my space. She shouldn't have been able to enter without fear, without trembling, but she didn't hesitate. She came to me like the silence she carried, soft, but unrelenting. I didn't leave, she said. 3 words. Simple, but they hit harder than bullets. Because they weren't for survival. They were a choice. I turned slowly, letting her see the truth of the scars across my shoulder, the burn near my ribs, the jagged line down my side, courtesy of a man I buried with my own hands. She stared, not in horror, not with pity, but with something else, curiosity and care. Her gaze moved over me like a touch, but when her hand followed it, I froze. She laid her palm flat on my chest, fingers spread. My heartbeat thudded against her skin. She didn't flinch. She leaned closer, breath warming the hollow of my throat. Who did this? She asked. Her fingers brushed the oldest scar. I could have lied. I didn't. I did. She looked up, brows pulling together. Sometimes, I said, pain is the only way to remember who you are. She didn't speak, but her hand didn't move. It pressed harder, like she could feel the weight of everything I didn't say. I brought my hand to her jaw, slow, watching for the moment she'd pull away. It didn't come. She tilted her head into my touch. Soft, fragile, but defiant. You shouldn't want this, I said. Her eyes flared. But I do. That nearly undid me. I stepped forward. Her back hit the wall behind her, and still she didn't stop me. My body caged hers. My breath tangled with hers. My mouth hovered just above her lips. Not touching, not yet. Her hands gripped my sides. She could feel every scar, every tremor. Tell me to stop, I whispered. She didn't. Tell me you don't want me. She didn't. Her breath hitched. And then, she rose on her toes and kissed me first. It wasn't slow. It wasn't careful. It was surrender. And when I kissed her back, I knew I was lost. But before I could pull her into the fire, before I could let go completely, she broke the kiss. Breathless, shaking. I can't. Not yet. And I respected that. So I stepped back, let the silence fall between us again. But this time it was charged, and it was hers.
I shouldn't have kissed him, not because I didn't want to, but because I wanted more, and that terrified me. My lips still burned, my hands still remembered the shape of him, the heat beneath my palms, the roughness of his scars, the tension in his muscles. He'd let me touch all of it, and when I kissed him, he didn't take, he gave, and when I pulled away, breathless, lost, he let me go. No threats, no punishment, just silence, the kind that wraps around you like a noose you don't want to cut. I locked myself in the guest room after that, but not because I was afraid of him, because I was afraid of me. I didn't sleep. I lay awake, fists curled against the pillow, throat tight, thighs aching. I'd kissed the man who broke into my apartment, the man who watched me sleep, the man who threatened another's life with a whisper, and I wanted to kiss him again. By morning, I told myself I had to leave. I got dressed, brushed my hair, found my phone, but I didn't turn it on. I stood at the door for 15 full minutes, hand on the knob, chest heaving. Nothing stopped me. No locks, no guards, no voice in the dark. But I couldn't make my feet move, because everything out there felt fake now. Too loud, too bright, too clean. Adrian's world, the world of white coats and rules and polite conversations, a world where I was invisible. But here, he sees me. Every shiver, every breath, every contradiction. And for the first time in my life, I feel like something more than a body in a uniform. I feel wanted. I left the door, not the apartment, just the decision to leave, and walked back to him. No words, no warnings. He was in the kitchen, shirtless again, drinking coffee like the world hadn't shifted last night. His eyes met mine, calm, dark. But I saw it, the flicker, the breath he held, the want he tried to bury under control. I didn't say anything. I just stepped close and placed my hand flat over his heart. I didn't need permission. He already belonged to me too.
She stood there, hand pressed against my chest like it belonged there. No question, no apology, just presence. And that was when I knew she'd crossed the line, not with fear, not with submission, but with choice. At sunrise, I told her to get dressed. Warm, comfortable. She looked at me from across the room. Where are we going? I didn't answer. She didn't push. That silence was worth more than trust. It was surrender. The car ride was quiet, but not empty. She sat next to me, head turned toward the city passing outside. Her fingers rested near mine on the leather seat, not touching, but pulsing with energy. I could feel her heartbeat without ever feeling her skin. It drove me fucking insane. We crossed into the industrial district, where the skyline vanished and the buildings breathed rust. The warehouse looked like death, exactly as it should. Outside, decay. Inside, life clinging to itself like it knew it was stolen. The first smell was blood. Not fresh, old, lingering. Then came metal, disinfectant, sweat. Elena didn't flinch. She stepped into the corridor like she belonged there. I watched her out of the corner of my eye as we passed armed guards and nurses in dark scrubs. She tracked everything, measured every face. I wanted them to look at her. I wanted them to see who walked at my side. No longer a dream in the dark, but flesh. Woman. Mine. The first trauma room was open. A boy, maybe 10, lay on a table, whimpering under gauze as a doctor stitched a jagged leg wound. Elena slowed. Her breath changed. Her eyes locked onto the trembling hands of the assistant trying not to pass out. I could help him, she said. Her voice was low, controlled. She didn't ask permission. I nodded once. She walked in like she'd never been gone from this world, grabbed gloves, took over. The boy stopped shaking within minutes, and I felt something tighten in my chest. Not pride. Something worse. Need. Because I'd seen 100 men bleed under her hands, but I'd never seen her save someone like she did just now. Calm, beautiful, unstoppable. Not for me, for him. When she stepped out, wiping her hands, there was blood on her wrist. I reached for her, wiped it away with my thumb. She didn't move, but her eyes locked on mine like she knew what I wanted to do with that. Come. I led her deeper, down a stairwell not marked, not lit. The air turned colder. The walls sweat. The sound of machines hummed, rhythmic, vital, pulsing. And there, behind triple locked doors, was the heart of it all. My command room, 3 floors underground. No windows, no clocks, no mercy. Elena stepped into the dark with me and didn't ask why. She moved through the space slowly, eyes wide. Screens flickered, surveillance feeds, names, notes. She turned to me. This is real. I stepped behind her, lowering my mouth to her ear. It's always been real. She looked over her shoulder. And I'm inside now. I nodded. You are. Dr. Morello joined us later. He looked at her. She yours? She's one of us, I said. He raised an eyebrow. Does she know what that means? Elena stepped forward before I could answer. I'll learn. Morello smiled. Then God help you. I walked her to a quiet hallway after. The lights were dim. The hum of the city no longer touched this place. I leaned against the wall and looked at her. You still want to leave? She met my gaze, unflinching. I don't know if I can anymore. Because you're afraid of me? She shook her head slowly. No, because I'm not afraid of you. I stared at her, heart beating too loud. This wasn't surrender. It wasn't corruption. It was belonging. She had stepped into my world, into my darkness, and instead of running, she started walking deeper. And I didn't stop her.
I was already wet before he touched me, and that terrified me more than any of the guns I passed that morning. The hospital pulsed like a living thing. Every hallway bled tension. The walls were thick with secrets, the air heavy with sterilized violence. But I didn't feel like a prisoner. I felt watched, not with suspicion, with hunger. They knew who I was, not my name, not my past, but who I belonged to. The first patient I tended to was a man with a knife wound to the gut. The blood was thick, dark, pulsing slow. His eyes were fever-glazed, but he smiled when he saw me. New angel in hell, he murmured. I said nothing, just worked. The other nurse stepped aside like I was already in charge. I felt him enter the room before I saw him. Damiano. His presence changed the oxygen. Everyone stilled, even me. He didn't say a word, but his eyes burned over my body, from the smudge of blood on my cheek to the curve of my waist beneath the scrubs. When I looked up, he didn't look away. And the desire that hit me was so hard, I nearly dropped the suture. By nightfall, I couldn't breathe without remembering his hands, the ones that held a gun without shaking, the ones that slid under my clothes like they already knew the shape of my shame. I wanted them on me, now. He found me in the locker room, sitting alone, hands pressed to my thighs like I could contain the heat building there. I heard the door shut behind him. He didn't say my name, didn't ask, just walked toward me like he always did, with the slow, quiet violence of a man who didn't need to announce his power. I stood before he reached me, our eyes locked, and I nodded once. That was all. And he knew. His mouth was on mine before I could exhale, hard, demanding, deep. His hand slid to the back of my neck, pulling me closer until there was no space between us. My back hit the lockers, cold. His body pinned mine, hot. I gasped against his mouth, but he swallowed the sound. His hand found my hip, fingers digging in, claiming. I moaned, raw, low, real, and that sound changed him. His other hand gripped my thigh and hiked it up around his waist, pressing me open to him, pressing me into him. There was no hesitation, no gentleness, just fire. He broke the kiss and dragged his mouth down my throat. I should ruin you, he growled against my skin. Here, now. My fingers tore at his shirt, needing more, needing skin, needing him. You already have, I whispered. His growl turned into a groan, deep, hungry. He pressed his forehead to mine. You're mine now. I nodded. I've always been. And when he lifted me into his arms and carried me out of that cold room, I didn't ask where we were going. I already knew. Wherever he was, that was home now.
She was still asleep. The sheet slipped low on her back, exposing the curve of her spine, her bare shoulder, the mess of dark hair tangled across the pillow. My bed had never known softness, only sweat, orders, bruises, but with her in it, it felt like something sacred. I watched her breathe, slow, steady, mouth parted in the aftermath of surrender. And for the first time in years, I didn't think about war, or blood, or betrayal. I thought about keeping her, not just hidden, not just alive, mine, always. Her legs stretched out under the sheets, brushing against me. My hand moved without thinking, fingers gliding up the back of her thigh, tracing that tender spot behind her. She shivered, still half asleep, and I smiled. She didn't just moan for me in dreams anymore. Now she belonged to both my darkness and my daylight. I slid out of bed carefully, pulling on black slacks and nothing else. Luca was waiting just outside the door. Say it, I muttered. He didn't blink. D'Alessio's been asking questions. I stilled. Elena? Luca nodded. He's been calling hospitals, private clinics, even asked around at her building. I exhaled slowly. And? He's making noise. Not smart noise. Emotional noise. Fool, I told him once, with a look, a shadow, a threat breathed into Elena's neck while she slept. But apparently, he needed a second lesson. I walked back into the room. Elena was awake now, sitting against the headboard, my shirt drowning her frame. She looked at me like I was still the man from last night, the man who touched her like she was precious. But I wasn't, not anymore. I was what I'd always been, a man who keeps what's his, and punishes anyone who tries to take it. She tilted her head. Something's... I sat on the edge of the bed, brushing my hand through her hair. Not yet, I said, but it will be. She didn't ask who or why. She just looked at me and said, don't kill him. A pause. A crack. Then I laughed. Low. Rough. You care that much? No, she said. But I know you, and I know what it costs you to spill blood you didn't have to. I leaned forward, mouth to her ear. If he touches you again, Elaine, I have to. She didn't argue. Didn't run. She just nodded. And kissed me once. Soft. Slow. The kind of kiss that doesn't cool fire. It feeds it. And I knew right then. She wasn't going any. Not even if I let her.
I knew something had shifted when two of Damiano's men stopped talking the second I entered the corridor. They weren't the type to hide anything. In this place, pain bled openly, and silence meant respect, not secrets. But now they looked at me like I was breakable again, and I hated it. Because I wasn't. Not anymore. I waited until they walked away, pretended I didn't hear, but I did. Her ex, the doctor, asking around again. Not smart. Boss won't let it slide. Adrian. A name I hadn't let myself think for days. A life I hadn't stepped back into. The idea of him felt distant, like a dream I'd once believed in. White coats, bright lights, safe hands. But I wasn't clean anymore. Not inside. Not where it mattered. I found Damiano in the control room, alone, leaning over a table full of maps and reports. Shirtless, of course, like he was too much man to ever bother hiding what he was made of. I stood in the doorway until he felt me. He always did. He looked up slowly, eyes dark, calm, too calm. You heard, he said. It wasn't a question. I nodded. What are you going to do to him? His silence was louder than a gunshot. And still, I stepped closer. He's not your enemy. He wants what's mine. His voice didn't need. I was the only in this world he didn't have to. He walked around the table, closing the. I stood my ground and found my throat. Not tight, not threatening. Just present. I let you choose, Elena, he murmured. You chose me. My breath caught. And I'll never let anyone make you doubt that choice. I should have said something. Should have told him I didn't need his war. But his thumb slid up to my jaw, tilting my head. And I melted. Again. Because this was the man who bled for me. The man who touched me like a storm, but looked at me like I was the only stillness he'd ever known. He kissed me like it was the last thing keeping him sane. His hands found my waist, lifting me onto the table, sweeping papers aside. I gasped into his mouth, hands fisting in his hair, legs wrapping around him before I even realized I was doing it. Tell me you don't want this, he growled. I can't. Then don't stop me. I didn't. And when he laid me back across the table, skin to skin, breath to breath, I knew one thing for certain. If I ever left him, it wouldn't be to escape. It would be to die.
I gave Adrian more chances than most. That was my first mistake, because I wanted her to choose me, not because she had to, but because she wanted to. But there's a limit, and he crossed it. The cafe was quiet, upscale, white marble tables, soft jazz, overpriced espresso. Adrian sat near the window flipping through his phone, clean, confident, soft. He didn't see me until I was standing in front of him. Dr. D'Alessio, I said calmly. His eyes lifted. Recognition hit him like a slap. Vitale. Not a question. A curse. Good. He stood too fast. The chair screeched. People looked. I didn't. I only looked at him. You've been asking about her, I said. He squared his shoulders. Brave. Stupid. She's not safe with you. My jaw flexed. I didn't move. She's not yours. That was mistake number 2. I stepped closer, our chests nearly touching. She made a choice. She doesn't know what she's choosing. I smiled cold. She knows exactly what she's choosing. I made sure of it. Every night. His mouth tightened. If you hurt her, I leaned in, voice low enough to scrape bone. Hurt her? I would burn the world to keep her warm. He swallowed. You think you're saving her, but you're not. No, I said. I'm keeping her. Security started to move. The cafe manager whispered into a phone. I didn't care. I pulled a black envelope from my coat pocket, slid it onto the table. Don't come looking again. Adrian didn't touch it, just stared at me with something between hatred and helplessness. You're destroying her. No, I said. I'm teaching her how to survive. And with that, I walked out, without looking back, because she was already waiting for me. I found her in the car, legs curled beneath her. Damiano scrawled on her wrist in faint pen. A private language, a claim she gave herself. She looked at me, saw the storm in my face, and didn't ask what I'd done. She just leaned in, pressed her lips to my jaw, and whispered, "Let's go home."
He didn't tell me what happened at the cafe. He didn't have to. I saw it in the tension of his hands, in the way he drove with silence like a loaded gun, and I saw it in his eyes. Not rage, possession, the kind that doesn't scream, the kind that simply takes, and I let it. I sat beside him in the car, knees pulled up, his jacket draped over my shoulders. I didn't ask about Adrian. I didn't want to know, because I already did. I knew Damiano didn't need blood to destroy someone, just presence, just truth, just her, me. When we got back to the apartment, he said nothing, just walked to the bar and poured whiskey into a crystal glass. I followed, bare feet silent on the floor. He leaned against the counter, watching me like he was trying to decide if I'd forgive him. He hadn't even touched Adrian, and yet, the violence hung in the air like static. "You found him," I said softly. A pause. "Yes. Did you hurt him?" He took a slow sip. "No, but you could have." He looked me in the eyes. "I still might. That should have scared me. Once, it would have. But now it just made my knees weaker. Not because I liked the violence, but because he would set the world on fire if it even tried to take me from him. And some dark, cracked part of me had never felt more safe. "I don't belong to you," I whispered. His body stilled. Then he stepped toward me, slow, icy, controlled. "You do," he said. "Whether you say it or not, whether you run or stay." He paused. "But I won't make you say it. Not tonight." That was the moment I broke. Not from fear, from want. I stepped into him, laid my hands flat against his chest, and kissed him. Not because I had to, because I wanted to taste the storm. He carried me to the bedroom like a secret, undressed me like a worshiper, took me again, but this time, slow, brutal only in emotion. And when he finished inside me, forehead pressed to mine, breath ragged, I whispered the truth into the dark. "I do belong to you." His body stilled, and then I felt it. The exhale, the release, the answer. "You always did."
She was still asleep when I opened my eyes, curled against my side, bare legs tangled in the sheets, one hand on my chest like she needed proof that I was. I stared at the ceiling for a long time, because I didn't know what to do with this kind of silence. It wasn't the silence of a threat, or the space before a bullet. It was peace, and that's what scared me most. Her breath warmed my rib, her thigh slid higher in sleep, her body molding to mine like it had always belonged there. And maybe it had. I ran my fingers through her hair, brushing it back, letting it fan out over the pillow. She sighed, shifted, then whispered, eyes still closed, "Stop looking at me." I smirked. "Like what?" "Like you're afraid I'll disappear." My chest tightened, because I was. Every second, she sat up slowly, letting the sheet fall, unbothered by her nakedness. And maybe that was the biggest shift. She didn't need to hide from me. Not her body, not her mind, not her darkness. We didn't speak for a while. There was no need. But eventually I walked to the safe behind the painting, opened it, pulled out one file, thick, marked, and handed it to her. She flipped it open slowly. Medical layouts, staff, equipment, supply routes, the hospital, my hospital. Her eyes met mine. "Why are you giving me this?" "Because I want you to run it." She stared. "Not just help," I said. "Own it, as much as I do." Silence. Then, "Elena Vitale, hospital director?" she said dryly. I raised an eyebrow. "Getting ahead of yourself?" She smirked. "Maybe." But she didn't hand the file back, and that was the only answer I. That night we stood on the rooftop. The city burned beneath us. Not in flames, in light. She leaned into me, arms around my waist, face against my chest, and I whispered against her hair, "Know what? That their queen has arrived."
The blood doesn't bother me anymore. Not the smell, not the sound, not the way it seeps into my gloves like it belongs there. I move through the underground halls like I was born here, clipboard in one hand, phone in the other, voice calm even when the screams start. They listen to me. They respect me. Some of them even fear me, and I like it. Today I saved a girl no older than 15. Knife wound, collapsed lung. She came in wide-eyed, broken, half dead. I worked fast, firm, without hesitation. I told her she'd live, and she believed me, because I don't lie. Not anymore. My white coat isn't white. Not really. Not with the stains that never come out. Not with the name they whisper when I pass. Her. The one he brought in. The one he never lets go far. They don't know the full story, but they know enough. And that's what keeps me safe. After hours, I lock the doors, turn off the lights, wash the blood from my hands. Then I stand in front of the mirror. I don't recognize the girl from the hospital anymore. The one who flinched at footsteps and believed in rescue. Now I believe in consequence. And in devotion. My fingers trace the mark on my inner thigh. A scar shaped like the edge of his ring. Left there the night I begged him not to stop. It doesn't hurt. It never did. Not truly. When he's gone, meetings, threats, midnight violence, I still feel him. In the ache of my muscles, in the breath I hold when I hear his voice down the hall. In the way no man looks at me for too long, because they know he would kill for a glance, and I would let him. They call this place a prison, a tomb, a crime, a curse, but they don't understand. I chose this. I walked willingly into the dark, and inside it, I found him. I found myself. No one owns me. except the one I begged to be kept. And in his hands, I've never been more free.
She moves like she forgot how to belong to the light, and thank God for that, because the light never knew what to do with her. But I do. I watch from the corner of the hall. She doesn't see me, or maybe she does, and just lets me pretend. She walks with blood on her hands and silence in her spine. She doesn't flinch anymore, not at the screams, not at the sirens. She's part of this world, my world. No, ours. The men nod when she passes. Some lower their head. Others pretend not to look, because they know. She's the only person I would burn my empire for, the only one I would kneel for, and they've seen what I do to men who forget that. She doesn't ask for respect. She doesn't speak like a queen, but they follow her anyway, not because she commands, but because she survives. And survival, here, is the only crown that matters. In the quiet hours, when the bodies are stitched, the blood washed, and the city outside dares to sleep, she comes to me, barefoot, tired, still beautiful enough to make my ribs ache. She climbs into my bed like it's a decision she keeps making, and I hold her like it's the last night we'll ever have. Every time. Because in this life, that's always possible. Sometimes she tells me about the people she saved, the ones who lived, the ones who didn't. She speaks softly, tracing the scar above my hip with 2 fingers like it's a prayer bead. I say nothing, just watch her, and wonder how I ever lived without her voice in the dark. They call me monster, shadow, devil. But with her head on my chest and her fingers curled into my ribs like anchors, I almost believe I'm something better. I never gave her no altar, no promise written in gold, but I gave her something else. I gave her my city, my war, my name, even if she never uses it. And when I die, because we all do, it'll be with her name in my mouth and blood under my nail. If anyone dared to touch her, I've killed for her. I'll kill again. And if the world ever asks me why I smile while I burn, I'll tell them this. Because I was hers, and being hers even for a moment was enough to make the fire feel like heaven. Thank you for staying until the last breath of this story. Your presence here isn't just seen, it's felt, like a hand reaching through shadows, like warmth found where there should be none. Every time you leave a like, a word, a trace of yourself in the comments, it's not just engagement, it's a heartbeat. It tells the silence that these stories matter, that love, even when it's dark, broken, feral, deserves to be heard. If you're still breathing with me here, I ask only this. Touch back. Say you're here. Even if it's just a single word, it means more than you can possibly imagine. And if your heart beats for stories like this, subscribe. Share it with someone who needs something deeper than noise. Let's spread love that bleeds. Let's heal the world, not with perfection, with feeling. You are welcome here, always. And if no one's told you this today, you matter, more than you know.